Hey, welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction, but most importantly, it's about recovery.
That's the most important part.
You know what I mean? Because I like to show people that recovery is possible, Dr. Matt.
That was our goal when we started the show.
Because the reality is everybody goes through tough times. And whether it's an addiction to alcohol, addiction to drugs, addiction to pornography, gambling. I'm not saying everybody's going to get that addiction, but
Netflix, Diet Coke, donuts.
Whatever it is. Yeah. There's something in your life that has power over you that you wish it didn't.
Or one of your family members do.
Yes. And sometimes the hardest part is how to reach that person, how to be empathetic, how to be loving, how to set boundaries. There's no rule book for this. We got all kinds of stuff on math and algebra, which we never, ever use, but nobody ever sits us down and teaches us how to communicate with our loved ones, how to be empathetic.
It would be a different world if that was required.
How to be understanding.
Yeah.
And so that's what we wanted to do on this podcast. Now, Dr. Matt, the first part of the podcast is always me and you just kind of chatting and what's going on in my life, what's going on in your life. And I was thinking about something I was driving down here. Even when I was in my most optimistic state, and this is when I was on the radio, I was married, everything seemed to be good, I always walked around wondering when the other shoe was going to drop. I mean, it didn't matter how good life was. I was always preparing for the other shoe to drop on anything. And it kind of always put me on the edge. Because I really wasn't able to be authentic and in the moment and enjoying everything that was going on because I was concerned about when's that other shoe going to drop. And I didn't even know what that shoe was going to drop about, but I was always in the back of my mind thinking, life's
kind of a feeling, right?
Yeah, like life is just too good. It shouldn't be this good. When is this going to come crashing down? Little did I know that it was going to.
We know the day now.
Yeah, it was September 3rd, 2018. But to be honest, there was many days before that that the shoe had dropped. But I can tell you right now, my life is going fabulous. It's going wonderful. I got great relationship with my parents, with my kids, with my girlfriend, with my ex-wife, with my work, with everybody.
Yeah.
And I don't have this overwhelming feeling that the other shoe is going to drop. That doesn't mean that I'm naive and I'm not preparing for the future and, should bad things happen. Because they are going to happen.
Yeah.
But I'm not constantly wondering when is it going to happen. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's a mind shift in my sobriety or I've kind of grown up and I just don't know what it is. But
that was going to be my question is, do you understand why it's different now?
I don't, but I don't feel like it. Like right now, everything's coming up aces for me. And
it's going well.
And it's great. And instead of wondering when the shoe's going to drop, I'm actually enjoying it. I'm enjoying my time on TV. I'm enjoying my conversations with my kids. I'm enjoying my girlfriend. I'm enjoying the relationship I have with my ex-wife. I'm not enjoying so much the remodel that's been going on since last December.
Yeah.
But I'm excited.
You will someday when it's all done.
Yeah. And maybe, I don't know why. Can you tell me why?
Well, let's talk about it.
Okay.
So back in the day when you said you had that feeling of everything, and we all knew you. I knew of you back in those days when you were on the radio, and before I was on that radio show, you had just left, so our paths didn't quite cross at that point. But things were going well. But like you said, you were thinking outwardly. So you're a self-proclaimed pleaser. You like to walk in the room, make everybody laugh, make everybody happy. Mm-hmm. You're on the radio. You're doing silly gags around Salt Lake City. You're entertaining everybody else. During that time, how much personal self-reflection, concentrated, purposeful growth were you engaged in on Casey?
Absolutely zero.
Right.
Maybe a little time at the gym.
You were spinning plates.
Yeah.
Maybe a little time at the gym.
Yeah, a little time at the gym.
That way.
And that was about it. Other than that, it was always, what can I do to make you laugh? What can I do to make you happy? What can I do to make these salespeople job easier? What can I, and that was my mindset. And it was like, if I'm pleasing all these people.
And you were the go-to guy. And a lot of people don't really know that behind the scenes when like a big band would come to town, Casey was out there like entertaining them, making them happy, getting them what they wanted. You were greasing all the wheels so that these bands would keep coming to town and performing here in Salt Lake, right?
I would pick them up at the airport. I would take them to the clubs. I would, if they said they needed anything, I would do my best to find it.
Anything?
Anything.
Yeah.
Anything.
We can leave it at that.
Yeah. Whatever they needed, I was their go-to guy.
Right.
And so a lot of times when they came back through, rather than calling the station, they would call me directly.
They call you. Yes.
And go, hey, we're coming into town. And I'd be like, cool.
Cool. And you set it up. Everything got set up. So a lot of people don't know all that behind the scenes. The way I vision your life, and a lot of people who are in that industry doing that thing, it's like spinning plates. You got to keep all those plates spinning. If you're old enough to remember the Johnny Carson days or those kind of TV acts where people would literally spin plates, they had to run around and keep them all going. And that distracts a person from any self-reflection. Right? You don't have time. You're trying to pay the bills, make the wife happy, deal with the kids, spin all the plates, make AC/DC happy, whichever band it is.
It was mostly Howard Jones, In Excess, Midnight Oil.
Those guys,
yeah.
And doing all that kind of stuff. And it distracts a person. Unfortunately, during the time in life when you can really, the term is individuate or become yourself in your 20s and early 30s. And so that was then, and you always had this sense that things are a little precarious. They may not last. When's the other shoe going to drop? Okay. Fast forward to sitting in detox. Mm-hmm. How did life for the next few months change in this regard as far as where your focus went?
Well, the focus all shifted inward. I had to fix me. I had to figure out what I liked. I had to figure out what I wanted, what was important to me, and how was I going to be able to get those things. That's what I had to do, and I had a lot of time to do it. Yeah.
Because you weren't everything else went away.
The crazy thing in my early career, I wanted to be who you wanted me to be.
Yeah.
I didn't become who I wanted to be. I became who you wanted me to be. And it didn't matter who it was in the room. I wanted to be the person you wanted me to be. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know who I wanted to be. And now, after the 3 years and a lot of internal work, I know who I want to be. I know what kind of person I want to be. And so that's probably right. Gosh, you're a good doctor.
Well, I would say that's the true meaning. What you're talking about right now is the core or the true meaning of the word recovery. We're doing a show called Project Recovery. And we've said on the show a lot, you've said a lot, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's recovery. Mm-hmm. And recovery means digging deep, changing your perspective, self-knowledge, growth, taking the time for yourself. It is so hard to try to provide for a family, create a career, keep other people happy, pay all the bills, and still spend time on self-discovery and self-development. And we're, like you said, we're not taught that. That's not a course in high school. It's the opposite. It's the opposite. Go out there, conquer the world, get a career, buy a big house, do big stuff.
Check all the boxes.
Yeah. But along the way, we forget about our self-development. So I think the reason, it's just a theory.
I'll take it.
But my theory is the reason you don't feel like the other shoe's about to drop anymore, and the reason that things are going your way is because you know who you are now. You aren't focused on trying to be somebody for someone else. You're focused on being yourself. And a lot of people don't know that opportunities have come your way in the last year, 18 months, that I think you would have jumped all over in the old days. You'd have been, yes. And now I hear you say stuff like, I don't know, I'm going to have to think about that. Is that right for me? Is that right for my family? I don't know that, even though these are big opportunities that I think if we announced them all, which we won't, but people would be like, oh my gosh, he didn't take that, he didn't do that. And it's because, well, you're now filtering it through Casey. Like, is this who I am anymore? Is this the right thing for me?
When I got the offer to come back on TV, the first people asked
that's an example.
Was my kids. I was like, hey, if you guys don't want me to do this, I'm okay. I won't do it. But it's up to you guys because you're part of it. Because unfortunately, you got dragged along the ride on the last one, and I don't want to put you in this.
Addiction's a family disease, right? Yeah. Well, that's my theory.
That makes sense. And I think the other thing is should the other shoe drop, and eventually one will, I know I can do hard things.
But you're grounded. You're Casey now instead of you're not my Casey or someone else's Casey. You're your own Casey. And so I would say if you're out there thinking about getting sober, that's awesome. but also start thinking about getting to know yourself, develop yourself, have personal insight. To me, that's the real definition of recovery. And then your whole life changes.
Yeah, it's amazing. Hey, Curtis, he's our guest today, Curtis G. Marsh. The G stands for Gary.
Gary, that's my dad, yeah. I'm proud of it.
At any point in your addiction, did you feel like you were a plate spinner?
Oh, when you were saying that, I called it a chameleon. You know, it was, if I was with my biker buddies, I was the biker guy. If I was with, another group, business group or religious group, whatever. Yeah, so I was always trying to please. And I think that stemmed from my upbringing. You know, I was the oldest of four. And so, you know, was that good enough? Was that good enough example for my siblings and, you know, please your parents? I think we all want to do that.
Yeah. The voice you're hearing is Curtis G. Marsh. He's the author of the book, Rise Above the Chaos. We're going to find out more about him. You're listening to Project Recovery right here on KSL. Hey, welcome back to Project Recovery. I'm Casey Scott. My good friend over there is Dr. Matt Woolley. He's a clinical psychologist, and I don't know you all that well, Curtis, but I'm pretty sure Dr. Matt's the smartest man in the room.
I wouldn't doubt it.
But you're a well-read
Casey
person.
says stuff like that.
You're a well-read person because Dr. Matt brought us a book today. It's called Man's Search for Meaning.
Beautiful.
And you said this is a great book, so you've already read it.
Yes, I have. Gary Lee Price gave me that book.
So me and Josh, the producer, are going to read this, and then we'll have a book report next week, or maybe in 2 weeks or a month.
It's a short one, and Viktor Frankl, I would say it's one of those books that if everybody read that book, it would create a culture of people that were self-reflective.
Really?
You would definitely rethink what your life means. Right. Where do you get meaning in your life? So I hope you'll read it.
Okay, I'm going to read it. I promise you I will read it. Curtis, where does the story of chaos, because that was your nickname through all the madness of your addiction, where does the story of chaos begin?
Chaos was a name given to me in the biker world by my buddy Gary Ross out of Boston, and we were riding with Dee Snider, Vince Neil, and Foghat up in West Yellowstone.
That's quite the group right there.
Yeah, that is.
Did you just listen to who he was talking about?
Those guys fly in their jets.
That's
we
a
had
motley
the bikes
crew.
for
Motley
literally.
Twisted Sister,
yeah.
Foghat.
Oh man,
wow.
Slow ride.
We had a great time, and he said to me, he says, "Hey, you're chaos." And I looked at him. I thought, that's not got the greatest meaning to me, and to the world. When you think of chaos, I mean, what do you think of?
Mess.
Disaster. Things aren't going well.
Just out of control. And he said that to me, and I thought, man. And then I thought, you know what? I think I started kind of playing into that because I was like unhappy with my life, and I thought, I am going to be chaos. I'm going to create chaos.
So you leaned into it.
I leaned into it, and I became that name. And I created chaos in my own life by, chaos comes into our life two ways. Life. It just happens. Something chaotic happens in our life, and how long we let it stay and what we let it teach us, nothing's designed to crush us, okay? Or chaos will come into our life by the choices that we make. And that was the majority of my chaos. I had the world by the tail, I thought. A lot like you, Casey. I worked on some major firms on Wall Street and had just a great life, but deep down I was fighting this pain and people pleaser that we talked about. So
where did the pain start? So let's start at the very beginning. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Salt Lake. Age 5, we moved to Bountiful, Utah. My parents, 2 West High graduates, and still with us today. My dad, Gary, and my mom, Beverly. Great people in their 80s. I was the oldest of 4, and that coupled with, I think, the upbringing in the faith that I was raised in, and it's not to bash the faith or anything like that. It's just I thought and felt inside that I was expected to be perfect. I remember playing sports, and if I fouled somebody or I didn't do something right, I'd look over at my dad. Is that good enough? So, and it wasn't necessarily him putting that on me, but it was that expectation I had on myself to be perfect in whatever scenario I was in. And that's a double-edged sword because I really excelled in some areas in life because I had that deep belief. But perfection doesn't exist.
Perfection isn't possible.
And once I realized that, my life started to shift. So, yeah, you're right. It's not. But I did think that at the time. Being the oldest of 4 kids, my upbringing. I mean, we had a great family. You know, the Norman Rockwell Hallmark type family. We did a lot. There was prayer in our home. There was a mom that had meals on the table. I mean, perfect. I mean, you wouldn't think that Curtis Marsh would have experienced what he did based on that pressure that I put on myself. You know, I'm not here to blame anybody.
Well, I think it's a dynamic. So I agree with you that you probably put it on yourself, but I would think of it more like kids bring something to the family and the culture that it's in bring something to the kid. And there's a dynamic interaction that happens there. You mentioned your place in the family. Oldest children, I'm in there, sometimes have a high sense of responsibility and identification with parents. So you feel like, I should be more like my dad. Now, if you're a second or a third boy, you can be a lot less like your dad. Like you can be like, I can goof around because the older brothers have me insulated, right? But the oldest takes on a sense of responsibility. And then because things were going so well, there's a model, you know, mom and dad are doing great and our lives are great. So we need to be just like them. But kids are naive. We don't have adult brains. We don't know everything that goes into putting that food on the table. We don't know all the mistakes our parents made. We just see the outcomes. And then also having a structured religious upbringing brings with it many benefits, but also a kid who has that sort of attitude that you brought to the table can feel a lot of pressure. And it's a dynamic, so it's not really anyone's fault. Right. I think that's an immature way to define those situations, but it is the result of all those factors coming together.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of times people feel a weight on them to do everything just right and to be perfect, and that wears a person down over time.
Yeah. No, that's exactly.
He's good, huh?
Yeah, he is the smartest one in the room.
I'm telling you. So, do you remember the first time you tried alcohol?
Yeah, you know, and it's you don't wake up and that's going to happen. It's a series of. I tell people when I speak to the youth, I say it's like Hansel and Gretel. You know, it's little teeny choices, little breadcrumbs that you're following into the forest, and then one minute you wake up and you're going, how did I get here? But if I can backtrack just a little bit, in 1986 I became the youngest financial consultant ever hired by Shearson Lehman Brothers, which is they were the biggest firm on Wall Street. They went belly up in 2008. Show you how bad that
we remember the
recession
Lehman
was.
Yeah.
And the why that I had associated my life with and was taught, you know, the blessings that come from you align with these things or your why in life, these blessings will come. That's how I was raised. When I started my career, I made $80,000 at the age of 23. That was back in 1986. And I don't say that boastfully, but it's kind of a benchmark.
That's a lot of money.
Now you shift from this why of humble, kind, you know, and the things that I was used to an arrogant, cocky. I was telling Casey out here, kissed both my biceps and said, "Hey God, I've got this. This is all about me. This is all about Curtis Marsh," and that was probably the first, you know, misdirect that I just started getting caught up in that world. And so my first drink of alcohol was just based on a accumulation of these little teeny decisions.
Do you think so
that I would make on the road and lie about and hide, and then I'd have to cover it with alcohol.
So growing up as a kid, junior high, high school, you didn't partake in any of those sorts of things because you still had that first attitude,
right?
The humble Curtis.
Yeah, I didn't have any experience with that. And then, you know, that people pleaser syndrome as well. And I remember walking into a hotel room, and we were paid big money, and I was paid to entertain people. And there was all kinds of alcohol and things there. And I thought, well, I'm going to participate because I wanted to be part of that crowd. And then the pain of that, because you take the pressure of thinking you have to be perfect, your upbringing, your why that you were aligned with. Now I'm really beating myself up. So now how do I cover that bad mistake? I cover it with another one, you know? And as an alcoholic,
it's a slippery slope.
It is.
So just to see if we got this right, so you make $80,000 at the age of 23, which is a ton of money, and that's back in 1986.
86, yeah.
And then you get hired by this big firm, and your job is to take all these investors out and show them a good time. You were telling me at one point you had a $300,000 allowance a year for entertainment.
$300,000 expense account, and that included my travel, my hotels.
That's a lot of money today, but back then that's an insane amount of money.
And so you're out there entertaining these people, and these are the movers and shakers in the world that you want to be a part of. And so you thought you would like to join them, and you wanted to be a part of that group, and this is what they were doing. So there's got to be something to it.
Yeah.
And so you take into it, but after you do that, you realize it doesn't align with your core beliefs, and you start to feel bad.
Yep.
And beat yourself up.
Yep. It's a painful process.
So then you do what a lot of addicts do. Rather than stop and address the situation,
yeah,
you compound it.
You make the next reactionary choice, and that is compound it with something else.
You don't pump the brakes, you hit the gas.
Yeah, right. Instead of, I've learned over the years that, between stimulus and response, you got to make a decision. And I could have corrected it, but I continued to beat myself up. I went, oh, man, I've drank now. I can't tell anybody. And see, then I hid it. And hiding that pain, and I would travel, so I'd only do it when I'd travel. I'd go home to my wife and my two beautiful daughters, and they didn't know.
So now you're living a dual life.
Right.
I mean, that.
See, you can feel the pain.
I get it because I've lived a dual life. One persona on TV and then one persona at home. I was on TV entertaining the masses, and then I was sitting at home on the deck by myself, drowning my sorrows in a 12-pack of beer.
Yeah.
And wondering who was who. And when we started this podcast, I know who I am now, but I didn't know back then. And I know who I want to be. So you're living a dual life. You're on the road. You're hiding your secret life from your family. And
just creating all kinds of inner chaos.
And what does that look like? I mean, does your wife at home ever wonder? Does it spiral out of control quick?
I'm sure she guessed a couple of times that, but she's a beautiful lady, beautiful mother to my kids, but I don't think she knew. But then again, as addicts, we think we're really doing a good job hiding, but she may have. She just didn't say anything to me. So this went on for years, and I'm thinking, how do I unravel this sucker? Because it's just getting worse and worse and worse, And by outward appearances, I had it all together. I had the lifestyle, all the cars, the boats, the motorcycles, the definition of worldly success was right there. And in fact, share a little story with you. People used to come up and say, hey, Curtis, you don't quite seem happy, but you've got everything. And they would look around, beautiful home, beautiful wife, two beautiful daughters. I've got all the material things. I've got a great job. I travel. I can do anything that I want. But I didn't have that inner peace. And I would say to them, for example, Casey, I'll tell you what. You come to my house on Saturday. We're going to go into the garage. I had a Harley Davidson safe with titles of ownership to my vehicles and Hummers and things like that. And I want you to bring me one thing, and it's not money. And we're going to go in that garage, and you can pick anything that you want. And I'm going to give you the title. But you have to give me one thing. Okay.
I'm in.
Yeah, you in?
Yeah.
So they would show up to my house, and they'd say, "Hey, I'll take the white Hummer." We'd go over to the role play, going through to the safe, take out the title, and I'd go to hand it to him and say, "Casey, here you go," and then pull it back, and I would say, "Just want one thing," and he'd look at me and say, "What is that?" I'd say, "Inner peace." And that's what I'd lost. And you know that feeling. Yeah. When you lose that inner peace, you are in chaos. You are completely out of control. And talk about, you know yourself now. You have that inner peace. I can see it in you, I've only seen you, handful of times, but you have a different look to you. That's that inner peace, I believe.
And nobody can give you inner peace. Only you can find it.
Well, one author of inner peace for me is my higher power, God. So that's one way that I rose above rock bottom.
So you're out there entertaining the world, checking all the boxes that you thought you needed to be checking. Are you just drinking at the time, or have you ventured into other substances?
You got to chase one bad with another one, right? You got to make another mistake to cover up that mistake, and so
that's a good strategy.
Works every time, doesn't it?
I'm going to lie to get out of that other lie.
Yeah. Instead of doing the next right thing, we always do the next reactionary thing.
Right.
It's emotion based, and it's like, man, I'm going to hell anyway. I might as well do this now.
I might as well go fast.
So I got into the drugs, prescription, non-prescription. It was just that lifestyle of entertaining, creating chaos in my own life. No one saw it. Maybe a few did. But that built up over the years. 2006, I retired. I was 43. And I thought, I got to get my life back. Mm-hmm. I got to get my family together. And in 2008... I walked into divorce court there in Farmington, and after 2 days of trial, I went straight from that courtroom to jail for 30 days for contempt, for telling a judge he was full of BS. I worked on Wall Street, so I thought you could say all those words. Yeah. And I spent 30 days, and that was, you had pivotal moments.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That was my first pivotal moment, I believe, to start. I believe that was God saying, hey, man, remember me? You put me on the bench back in 86, but I've been with you. You put me, I'm going to help you out, but I got to slow you down. So I spent 30 days in jail for contempt. And I'll tell you what, it was the worst, best 30 days of my life. And the reason I say that is because when you have nobody else to listen to, except for your own self, you have your connection with a higher power. You better have one at that point. And that was when I started to kind of get a grip on myself in 2008. And like we talked, you don't change overnight. I didn't walk out of jail thinking I'm going to be a changed man. I was still angry. I'd lost everything on my divorce. My kids were in Cedar City now. I go to jail to a home that's, that Hummer was gone from the parking lot that I drove to jail that day. My house is sold. I was still angry. And my ego and arrogance, I thought, man, I used to rule my world with money and muscle. And it was like, I'll get it done. I know people. When the bailiffs were putting handcuffs on me, the judge said, you're the most egregious man that I've ever met in 18 years. And I wanted to say, I've got more, Keep antagonizing me, buddy. And then he said, you just got yourself 30 days in jail. No bail. I said, good, I got money, I'll bail. And he said, no bail. And I said, I know people. I spent 30. Okay? Because it doesn't matter who you know. But that was a great moment for me.
Let me jump in, and I need to ask a question because my curiosity is going. So you, prior to this jail stint, that was 2008. In 2003, you said you retired, and with the goal... 2006, sorry. You had the goal to get your life back, to get your family kind of righted and right your ship, so to speak.
Yep.
And then what happened in those 2 years? Like if that was your goal in 2006, how did you end up doing 30 days in jail in 2008? Why didn't it work out?
Great question. When you create so much chaos in your life, it's not an automatic reversal. I did think to myself, I'm going to get off the road. I was traveling 4 or 5 days a week. I would cover 28 states. My office was in Boston or Chicago or New York at the time. And I thought, I'm going to get off the road. I'm going to kind of reel things in. I remember buying a boat, and I was going to, do more family stuff. And hope. There was a lot of hope there. There was no real plan, but hey, I'm going to try to get my life back.
But I can kind of see your thinking, because so far everything else you've wanted to do, you've accomplished. So if it sounds like if you wanted to put your mind to it, like this is what I'm going to do, the world's given me everything else I wanted, so why is it not going to give me this?
This one was bigger than me, though. I found out, But you're right. I thought, okay, I'll get off the road. I've got money. I'll make sure that I spend time with my family and so forth. So I started to do the work, but that pain was so deep. I mean, when I speak to the youth, I say it's like getting a sliver, and you get this pain in your heart and your soul of all the choices that you've made that you have labeled as negative, bad experiences, and that just festers. And until you completely get that sliver out, and that sliver for me was choices, just a ton of slivers. Until you get them all out, you don't have much of a chance to succeed, because you still live in that entitlement world. That ego is taking control. So. To answer your question, 2006, and I started, but again, it was just very hard to completely unwind.
I wonder if part of that is summarized in your statement that when you were sitting in jail alone, you're just with yourself.
Yeah.
And you reached out for a higher power. But being with yourself, I could tell the way you said that was a really uncomfortable place to be alone with yourself. And when a person, you've used the word ego a few times, mm-hmm. when their ego or their sense of who they are is all wrapped up in what they do,
yes,
and then you retire from what you do, now you're stuck with a stranger.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if those 2 years were not successful because you weren't really you anymore. You weren't the high-rolling guy who traveled around the country all week and did big things and had a $300,000 expense account. You were just supposed to be dad or husband, and that wasn't a comfortable person to be, because it sounds like, and I don't mean to be dramatic in my language, you betrayed that person by the choices you made.
Absolutely.
And so then you're stuck with somebody you don't know.
Yeah.
And you're like, and feelings of shame and guilt seep in there, right? And shame is such a killer. I don't know anybody who's a recovered addict that didn't harbor deep feelings of shame at some point in their addiction.
Yeah.
We're going to get more of Curtis's story in just a second. You're listening to Project Recovery right here on KSL. Welcome back to Project Recovery. I'm Casey Scott. That's Dr. Matt Woolley. Our guest today is Curtis G. Marsh. He's the author of the book, Rise Above the Chaos. And we just heard from him, and he talked about his 30 days in jail. And as Dr. Matt so eloquently put it, is you were in jail with a stranger, and that stranger was yourself.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you get out of jail, you're still angry at the world, you're still mad. And what does your life look like then?
You go from senior vice president of a major firm to inmate number such and such. I get out that day. My car is gone from the parking lot that I drove there. My parents picked me up. They throw you your wrinkled bag of clothes, put those on. It's humbling. And you walk out. Your house is sold. Your clothes are in black, hefty trash bags. That's basically all you have left from this whole mess. So again, it was just a series of, now what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
What's the next right thing? And again, that ego and that power trip, it took a while to let that subside, because I want to go back to court. I want to continue to fight. But that 30 days to where I really had to connect with a higher power on a level that I've never connected before, started that process. It was one of the most pivotal moments, because January 1st, 2010, I quit the drinking. I've been sober since that point, January 1st, 2010.
Was there a traumatic experience that led up to January 10th, 2010? Did you... Or was it something that you've been working towards for the past little while.
Yeah, it wasn't like your experience. But, I think jail started it because you get to know, you start talking to guys in there and you realize that, I could end up being a lifer just like a lot of them were, and how easy it is. So it was the night before, and I was at a party, and I went home and I thought, I'm not hanging around good people. I'm not putting myself in great places. I'm not doing good things. And I have to realign with my why. My why is my children, my family, my faith, my belief, my friends, giving back. I do a lot of charity work. And when I lose myself in that is probably one of the most powerful things that I did for myself, and I believe anybody can do, because you shift into a different world of serving others. And
you've mentioned this a couple of times, finding your why. And you're not the only guest who's sat in that seat and talked about that. But for those who are maybe just joining us, Dr. Matt, why is it important to define our why?
Well, it's in the title of that book I gave you, Man's Search for Meaning. What's the why is a common phrase used to define what is your meaning in life. Why do you do what you do?
Right.
Is it chaos? Are you just trying to keep the plate spinning? Are you not thoughtful about why you're doing what you're doing? Is it self-serving? Are you your own why? Or have you found things of a higher nature to become your purpose and your meaning in life? And so I think that's what people mean when they say find your why, because it's like a compass, it's a direction, it's a purpose for living your life. The first thing you mentioned were your daughters. Well, that's a beautiful why, because if you keep something like your children in the forefront of your mind, that influences the types of decisions you make. If you think about service as a why, I'm here for other people, I do things to serve other people. Well, that's going to change the decisions you make on a day-to-day basis. If faith and belief in a higher power is part of your why, then that's certainly going to influence the daily decisions you make. So to me, that's what that means.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, and those blessings and that gravitate to that why. So whatever your alignment is, your choices, your behavior, your patterns, they start to make that shift. My why had shifted early on to, success, cars, the money, the ego, the just that lifestyle. And although I still love my family and everything, my why shifted to this. That was a whole different set of consequences that came from focusing on that.
So how long, you said you started partying at around the age of 23.
Yeah.
You got sober June 10th, 2010.
January 1st. Yeah.
So how many years were you partying?
Off and on, when I first got into the brokerage world, age 23, there were some situations, went through a divorce, because I got so cocky and arrogant. And then I got married to my kid's mom, who was just a beautiful human being. And that was, I was 27. She was 19. So I'd cleaned up my life at that point. And
that's
then,
cutting it a little close, huh?
Huh?
27 to 19. Yeah. You're cutting it a little close there.
So my daughter, her husband's 8 years older, and she's like, "Dad, you can't say anything." It's different.
But so you stopped drinking. How did you stop drinking? Did you just go cold turkey?
On the January 1st date?
Yeah.
How old were you in 2010? So how old were you then?
2010, I was, let's see, I'm 59 now, so you guys are putting me on the spot doing the math.
47.
47.
And you just quit cold turkey?
Yeah, I woke up and I just thought, I'm absolutely going nowhere. I mean, I've lost everything, 2008, literally. How am I going to recoup, and what do I need to do? So, I looked at that word chaos and I said, okay, got to start making some different choices. And it's just one choice after another, just little teeny choices, not to be perfect, but progress.
How old were you when you got the nickname Chaos? Give me, I know I'm giving number grief right now, but I'm curious, how long were you living as the persona of chaos?
That was probably 2000.
So you spent a decade as your moniker. You were chaos. That was an identity that was building during that decade.
I had it on everything, license plates. This ring my daughter's made for me has chaos over here, and then my first motorcycle. And I started to want to be. I'm thinking I've already screwed up, so
embrace
why not
it.
just really create some chaos?
So it became, those of us who are comic book nerds, this became your alter ego.
Yeah, it really was,
to the point that even your daughter, people knew that was your alter ego.
Yeah,
interesting.
I'm that guy that didn't have the inner peace, that would be sitting out on the porch crying, or in his hotel room going, everybody thinks I'm a rock star. They nicknamed me the Wall Street trading, Harley riding, rock and roll cowboy.
Well, you're hanging out with Vince Neil.
Yeah.
D. Snyder.
D.
Fog hat.
Yeah,
come on.
We
Has that changed? Like, back in those days, did you think? Today it seems like there's this theme of like the self or the ego, like who we are. A lot of that has to do with how reflective we are on ourselves. And one thing that's an interesting exercise for a person to do is spend a week making notes about the things you say to yourself, like how do you talk to yourself, including how do you refer to yourself. So in those days, do you think in your own mind you referred to yourself as that nickname, chaos?
Yeah.
And has that changed? Do you still refer to yourself in your mind that way?
I don't.
You don't ask yourself, what would chaos do?
Whatever chaos wants. That's
Back in the day. No, now it's I've got to rise above that chaos, because chaos still comes into my life, whether it's just because of an event that happens in my life, and I decide how long it stays.
And it sounds like you've had a big identity shift. I guess that's my point, is you embraced that as an alter ego.
Yeah, I did.
To the point that it was on license plates and
everything.
Whatever. And that became part of your identity. And we all act according to how we think about ourselves. Like that, our identity determines in many situations our behavior. I'm curious, it sounds like you had a shift to where I don't want that to be my identity anymore.
Yeah, it started to just feel uncomfortable, and it was when I did the book and then the TEDx talk, Rise Above the Chaos, that just felt so much better.
But you used chaos again to straighten your life around, turn your life around, should I say. You turned it into an acronym. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so chaos, I started kind of studying the name, and do you know what chaos means in Native American and Japanese cultures?
I don't.
From chaos comes new beginnings and brilliant new dreams. One must experience chaos to give birth to dancing new stars. And that I started to take on. I thought, I've created a lot of chaos. I've got it in my life now. I've got a great foundation of a ton of chaos that I can create some new beginnings with. You had it in your experience.
Yeah.
Chaos created a new beginning for you. And so I shifted to that, and I've got that on my walls in my office in my home. The chaos symbol. I got the chaos symbol tattooed just above the left ankle to remind me I've risen above that.
But you've repurposed that now.
Right.
Yeah, you've redefined what that means. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and I've used that. So I've used that definition and how I rose above, and this is kind of what I want to focus on, because my story is my story, and it's a collection of experiences. But people always say, well, how do we get out of it? You said that many times. How am I going to get out of this mess? I'm sure.
Yeah.
And so I took the acronym CHAOS, and C stands for choices. And you have to say to yourself, look, I've made a lot of choices, and I don't label them good or bad or ugly. They were choices. And if I choose to label them bad choices, guess what? They're going to be bad choices, and I'll beat myself up over it because now I've got a ton of bad choices. They're just choices. Okay, so I have to shift those choices. I have to shift my response and my choices. Okay, so that's the C, in order to change. That's how I remember it. The H is higher power. And for me, I don't know how anybody, can beat addiction without some type of higher power. For me, it's God and Jesus Christ. It can be whatever your higher power is. Okay? The A stands for accountability.
I like it.
You got to start taking accountability for who you are, the choices that you're making, and why you're here. Because blame, shame, and entitlement, nothing grows in that space.
That
Accountability,
is so true.
personal responsibility, and ownership is where you see it all happen. That's where the real rock show happens. Okay? And so A is that. O is open. You've got to be open and vulnerable. You've got to be open to change and vulnerability. It's hard for me to tell this story, but every time I do, it reminds me that I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to that spot. And then the S, this sounds so weak, coming from a guy who was known as the Harley riding, Wall Street trading rock and roll cowboy.
I've seen you do videos with Billy Blank.
Yeah, that's me. Surrender. The S stands for surrender. You have to surrender to everything that you have created. You created this mess. Now surrender and let go, let God, for me. So surrender's huge.
I love that acronym. That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
That's the way I remember
There's some
it.
hard stuff in there, too. Like, I'm thinking about, a guy who felt like he had the world by the horns, we'll say, being open and surrendering. Those are tough. Those are tough things. I mean, I hope the listeners are pausing to think about, like, how open am I? Like, because we want to control what happens to us in life, and
we want to control what people know about us. In life.
everything.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's
everything.
the big one. Is like, because we all mess up everybody on a daily process, but we don't let everybody know about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of times we hide those. We're like, oh man, no.
well, I think one area where you've surrendered is your mugshot.
Yeah.
So many people, myself included, would probably feel humiliated and embarrassed to have that mugshot out there. But
I'm getting put on my debit card.
I know you told me that. I think that's
awesome.
amazing. That you've surrendered to the fact that that happened. That's me.
Yeah.
And it sounds like your redefining and repurposing of the word chaos is, man, that's a lot of work, but it's beautiful.
Thanks. And full surrender is hard, but it's the greatest blessings will come from that.
So how does that turn into a book?
I was asked to do a book. That was about 4 years ago, and then the TEDx talk 3 years ago. And
Is he our first TED Talk guest? I think so. We've had a few other people write books, but we've never had anybody.
TEDx. It's
do
called
the
Rise
TEDx.
Above the Chaos, and I'm not plugging it, but it was.
People should watch it.
I fought it like crazy. I'm like, I don't want to go do this. I didn't feel, although I spoke for a living, doing my occupation and working with financial advisors and clients, but I did it. And the first, your letter from your daughter that she wrote. Here's why it touched me so much. My oldest daughter, Cheyenne, was the first person that I practiced my TEDx talk on. I sat her down in my office and I said, "Hey, I'm gonna go through this. I can only speak for 18 minutes. Will you listen?" Now my daughter didn't know, and I ran the risk of losing her, but I surrendered at that point, and I was going to be vulnerable because what she heard in that 18 minutes. As soon as I got done, I said, "Cheyenne, did you know those things about me?" And she said, "Some of them, Dad." And she stood up and she came over. She gave me the warmest embrace that I've ever felt, and that's that full surrender. When you surrender and be vulnerable, love flows into your life. Truth flows into your life. Good things flow into your life. So that's how that came about. And now I love speaking to the youth. Speak out at the prison. That's coming. That hasn't happened yet, but so any opportunity I have to tell my story and pay forward is. And so thanks so much for having me on. You guys are awesome.
I'm just sitting here still feeling the goosebumps, picturing that moment
With your daughter.
I mean, what you couldn't have said it any better. How love flows into your life when we're open and we surrender and we're authentic with people. Because prior to that moment, she knew some things about you, but there was a barrier between you guys, and you broke that barrier down by taking the chance that she would reject you if she knew the whole story, and the opposite happened. I'm blown away.
She didn't speak to me for 6 years prior to that.
Wow.
And I stuck with it and just keep doing the next right thing. And then I ran that risk. It was huge. I'm going, should I not say everything, or should I sugarcoat it? And again, then I'd have to be living with that lie and probably start drinking again to cover up that, So
the thing that I'm thinking about, and I'm listening to your story, Curtis, and thank you so much for stopping by and sharing it with us, is that, even on this podcast, sometimes we get too into the salaciousness of somebody's disease and to their addiction.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean?
Well, we've had some big stories.
But here's a guy who's done a lot, partied with a lot, and been around the world. And although we don't know all the details of your story, I could feel the pain. I know what you had. I could see what you lost, and I saw what it did to you.
Thank you.
You know what I mean? But more importantly, I see the man that's sitting in front of me, and I see, I'm going to say it, the inner peace. And what a blessing that is to have. And I think that's absolutely amazing, man. And you have surrendered. You are open. You are vulnerable. And you're going to change the world. You're doing wonderful things.
Thanks, bro.
And I hesitate, but I think the rock star lifestyle started in 2010 for you.
It did.
You know what I mean? And this is the rock star you want to be, bud.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Thank you.
This is the one that's going to make a difference. This is the one that's going to get people talking. And this is the guy you want to be.
Thank you so much.
This is who you are, man. And I'm so glad to know you. So thank you for stopping by.
Grateful to know you. You've been an inspiration, both of you.
I think the best part of your story today is not hanging out with rock stars and all of those things. Those stories might be interesting on a certain level.
Yeah.
But the best part of the story is getting the hug from your daughter.
Oh, yeah.
That's the best part of the story right there. And I agree with Casey. I don't think anything could make a dad feel better than to have that resolution with a child that you almost lost in your life.
Yeah. And I have two beautiful daughters. They both live within a mile of me, and we spend a lot of time together. And they are my why.
Yeah, that's the meaning in life. There's your meaning right there. And if people are listening and feel like you could do some good coming and speaking to their group, how would they arrange that?
I'm working on a website right now, but just get a hold of me through Facebook. I have a Rise Above the Chaos Facebook page, or my personal page.
And we'll link to that through our stuff, because I think somebody who can come in with your charisma, life experience, and perspective, that's what kids, young adults, people who are in that process of defining their identity, that's what they need to hear. They need to hear that all that material stuff that betrayed my true identity.
Yes.
It wasn't really who I wanted to be. This is who I want to be. So I appreciate people like you doing so much good in our community.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You guys are great.
And thanks for everybody stopping by and listening to another episode of Project Recovery. In case you forgot, Project Recovery is what?
You know, Casey, it's a KSL podcast.
Hello, Salt Lake City.
The contents of this program are for informational purposes only. The program is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this program. KSL does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the program. Reliance on any information provided on the program is solely at your own risk.